The rejection happened so quietly that it almost felt louder than a scream. On a rainy afternoon in downtown Chicago, a man in a worn gray jacket stood outside a glass-walled office tower, holding a folded resume that no one had bothered to read. His name was Michael Anderson, and in that moment, he looked like just another man the world had decided to overlook. What no one knew was that behind his tired eyes lived a secret worth millions, and behind his silence lived a heart that had been bruised by rejection far deeper than money could ever heal. Sometimes, the greatest turning points in life begin not with applause but with humiliation. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of doing good when no one is watching, take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that are still waiting to be seen. Michael Anderson had not always been invisible. Years ago, he had built a thriving logistics company from a rented garage in Ohio, working late nights with cold coffee and stubborn faith. By his early 40s, he was a self-made millionaire, respected in boardrooms and praised in business magazines, but success had come with a cost. His marriage had collapsed under the weight of his absence. His friendships had faded into holiday texts, and his faith in people had slowly eroded. After selling his company for a staggering sum, Michael made a decision that confused his advisors and alarmed his lawyers. He wanted to disappear, to see the world without the armor of wealth, to know if people could still care when he had nothing to offer but himself. So he moved to Chicago under a different name, dressed simply, and rented a small room in an aging apartment building. He applied for ordinary jobs, walked into offices without recognition, and waited in lines where no one hurried for him. What he did not expect was how deeply rejection would cut when there was no safety net of status to fall back on. Day after day, he was turned away. Too old, overqualified, underqualified, not a good fit. Each polite dismissal chipped away at his confidence, until even he began to wonder if the success he once had was just luck. One afternoon, soaked from the rain and exhausted from another failed interview, Michael ducked into a large corporate building to dry off. It was a place he could have owned once, or at least consulted for, but now he blended into the background. As he stood near the lobby, he noticed a woman quietly mopping the marble floor. Her name, he would later learn, was Grace Thompson. She wore a simple uniform, her hair tied back neatly, her movements calm and steady. There was something about her presence that felt warm, like a light that did not demand attention. Grace was a maid who had seen her share of hardship. A widow in her mid-30s, she worked 2 jobs to support her young son and aging mother. Life had not been gentle with her, but it had not hardened her either. When she noticed Michael standing there, clearly lost and discouraged, she did something no one else had done that day. She looked at him, really looked at him, and smiled. It was a small gesture, but it landed like grace itself. Over the next few days, Michael found himself returning to that building, not to beg for work, but simply to sit in the lobby and collect his thoughts. Grace would nod at him, sometimes offering a cup of water, sometimes just her quiet presence. She never asked invasive questions, never judged his worn clothes or distant stare. In her eyes, he was not a failure or a nobody. He was just a man having a hard season. As weeks passed, a fragile routine formed. Michael began helping Grace with small tasks, holding doors, carrying light supplies, anything to feel useful. In return, she shared her story in gentle fragments, about faith that had carried her through grief, about believing that God saw even the unseen. Her words stirred something in Michael that had been dormant for years. He had measured life in profit margins and growth charts, but Grace measured it in compassion and perseverance. Meanwhile, rejection continued to follow Michael. A security guard job fell through. A warehouse position was given to someone younger. Each setback felt heavier, because now there was someone whose quiet belief in him he did not want to disappoint. One evening, after a particularly rough day, Michael sat alone in his room, staring at his bank app, the numbers unchanged and untouched. He realized that the real poverty he had been experiencing was not financial. It was emotional, spiritual, and painfully human. The turning point came unexpectedly. One morning, the building buzzed with tension as executives rushed through the lobby. A major audit was underway, and systems had failed overnight. Grace watched nervously as managers panicked, knowing that any mistake could cost workers like her their jobs. Michael, overhearing the chaos, recognized the problem immediately. It was the kind of logistical failure he had solved countless times before. For a moment, he hesitated. He could stay silent, remain invisible. But then he saw Grace, hands clasped, praying quietly. Without revealing his past, Michael offered a solution, calmly outlining steps that stabilized the system within hours. The executives were stunned. Questions followed. Credentials were requested. The truth could no longer stay hidden. By the end of the day, Michael Anderson was no longer just a man in a gray jacket. He was the founder they had read about, the mind behind a multi-million-dollar success story. The revelation spread quickly, but what stayed with Michael was not the sudden respect or renewed offers. It was the way Grace reacted. There was no shock, no change in her kindness. She smiled the same way she always had, proud not of his wealth, but of his character. In that moment, Michael understood something profound. She had valued him when he was nobody, and that made her more precious than any fortune. Michael accepted a consulting role, but with conditions. He ensured fair wages, better benefits, and job security for workers like Grace. He quietly paid off her debts, funded her son's education, and set up a foundation to support service workers across the city. He did not do it for praise. He did it because kindness had rescued him first. As his life transformed, so did his faith in humanity. Rejection had stripped him of pride. Grace had restored his heart. Together, in a way neither expected, they had changed everything. If this story is touching your heart right now, if it reminds you that kindness still matters in a world that often rushes past pain, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps keep these meaningful stories alive. Before this story ends, we have a special request for you. Please comment below with one word that describes how this story made you feel. Your words may encourage someone else who is silently struggling. In the end, Michael realized that being rejected had not been the tragedy. It had been the doorway, and the maid who had quietly changed everything was never just a maid at all, but a reminder that sometimes God sends answers in the most humble forms, waiting for us to notice.